"You're never going to be like Alex," my mother said, the words a clean cut across the table. The roast was forgotten. The television in the next room flickered on cartoons. The dinner of the gnome. My father's stare skimmed my face and settled, as if he'd been waiting his whole life to say exactly that. I pushed my chair back so hard, the leg hit the hardwood, and made a sound meant to be sharper than anything else in the room. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. My voice did not carry the tremor I felt. I had spent 26 years mastering the art of not shaking. My Saturno, my brother Alex sat at the head of the table like he owned the air in the house. Blonde hair, that small, smug upward curl of lip, the way people softened when he spoke. Here was everything they'd built their expectations around. He was the son they bragged about at barbecues and the face that fit their story. I was the footnote. "You need to accept that some people are just born with it," Dad said. "Alex has it. You don't." I looked at them and felt something start under my ribs like a fist. I tasted all the moments stacked like plates, every award I didn't get, every scholarship application that evaporated under a preferred name, every parent-teacher conference where his face rose like a tide and mine sank into silence. It was ridiculous and humiliating, and I had learned to swallow it. "Fine," I said. "I'll leave." They blinked. "Leave? Where would you go?" "Anywhere. Away." The table felt like a stage for a verdict. They did not try to stop me. That night, I packed a duffel without looking back. I left a note on the kitchen counter, 2 sentences. "I'm not staying for the show. If you ever want to talk to me again, start by learning how to treat people like humans." Then I drove. I drove until headlights blurred into a white line and the city swallowed me whole. You don't start revenge like a banner. You start it like a job, late, consistent, silent. I took temp jobs, then contracts. I learned to flip words into contracts, to flip contracts into small wins. I slept on couches and in cheap motels, practiced calming my breathing until panic was a tool I could use. I took classes at night, coding classes, public records, law auditing, the kind of things you think won't help but will. Alex got his promotions and smiles. The world kept telling me his name in places I could never risk. I watched him from a distance. Social media posts, PR pieces, family updates. He had the life they always claimed he deserved. He'd married a marketing consultant named Jenna who laughed like she was paid to be charming. Together, they were a brand. Perfect. My work paid off. Not in the fast, flashy way. In the slow, inexorable way, numbers accrue, quiet bank accounts, a rented small office, a computer with more memory than I'd ever need. I started pulling threads, not to destroy, but to understand. You can't plan effective revenge without data. I read privacy policies for fun at 3 in the morning. I learned to read the spaces people left open, password resets, an exasperated celebrity lawyer's public tweet, a sloppy ledger index. Then I found the first open ledger. He thought he was careful. He wasn't. He never worked to protect the one thing that made him dangerous to others, his ego. His ego wrote checks in places that didn't need legal oversight. And in that open ledger was the pulse I needed. Hush money, transaction after transaction with names that were not his, locations and dates, and worst of all, his name on the memo lines. The petty arrogance of him believing he was above being tracked. That ledger gave me the outline. The ledger told me about a charity Alex had started to launder small things through. The charity that, of course, had a friendly website and a board that included 3 men with political leanings and 1 with a sudden presidential connection. The ledger showed me payments to a shell company that purchased private data for marketing. It showed me payments that were too specific, payments to a handwriting teacher's paymaster who had altered affidavits. It showed me why certain decisions had been made in our family. So I collected more, a backup of his business phones, cloud logs. Easier than people think when their assistant uses the same password for everything. A list of donors who'd rather pay to be quiet than to be seen. I didn't act. I waited. Patience is the one tool in revenge that turns vindication into art. "You're a ghost," Alex said into the phone when I finally called him 6 months later. His voice carried the slow, practiced surprise of a man who'd expected remorse and gotten silence instead. "You called me a week ago to wish me happy birthday. That brought you grief?" He asked. He laughed. It annoyed him to no end when I didn't succumb to the expected performance. "Why did you do it?" I asked. "Do what?" "You know, you always had it easy. You always had the line." I heard him take a breath. He'd come to believe his life was fate playing its course. He told me he'd always assumed I'd get tired of being the underbeat in his symphony. He admitted he'd been happy when I left, like a weight had been lifted. His voice was thin with something like triumph. It made my pulse calm. "Now what?" he asked. "You want money? Apology? Come home." "No," I said. "You'll come to me." He chuckled. "And why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, people who think you're perfect will learn your ledger's name." He laughed harder. "You'd blackmail me. That's melodramatic. That's not you." That laugh pinned a plan in the room in a way nothing else could. He had confidence in a shield that was nothing but brittle glass. The ledger would smash through it. But blackmail was crude. I wanted elegance. I wanted the truth to wake everyone up without me needing to be the villain. I wanted people to see him Not me. I hung up, and the city noise outside my window sounded like applause. I started small and public. A single anonymous tip to an investigative local journalist who loved stories about nonprofit corruption. I had all I needed: screenshots, URLs, backups. I wrote the email like a surgeon, concise, clinical, impossible to ignore. The journalist called the next day. "We have evidence," she said, voice low. "We've been tipped. If you can meet us with more documents, we can make a run." I met them in a coffee shop with a black espresso machine that hissed like it was spitting out secrets. I pushed the data drive across the table. Metadata, intact, timestamps. I watched their face go quiet, then efficient. The thing about professional journalists is they smell volume and move with it. 2 days later, the nonprofit's press release turned to ash. The headlines use words I'd never seen assigned to my brother: charity, misappropriation, conflict of interest, improper data sales. I saw Alex's name in an article that spread like mold. I watched his Instagram followers comment with slow suspicion and then panic. Within a week, Alex began calling. "What did you do?" he said, voice brittle. "You made poor decisions." I answered. "You put your hands in places where you thought no one would look." His life became a current. He hired lawyers, smiled through interviews, made statements about being misunderstood. Dad called me and used a voice he reserved for lawnmower repairs and bank audits. "What have you done?" he asked. I said nothing. Public humiliation is loud, but private collapse is louder. Alex began snipping at the threads of the people who'd once created his safe net. Friends leaked texts to reporters, texts he never thought would be A donor withdrew funding because the audit's headline begged for public distance. Jenna posted a photo of flowers with a message about standing strong and then quietly deleted social media for a week. Alex's PR tried to spin. Spin was a lazy man's attempt to hide blood. The first time I saw him in person after that was at our father's old bar. The kind of place that smelled like pre-made nostalgia. He sat at the counter, hands around a glass like a life buoy. He didn't look me in the eye. He mouthed through a smile when the bartender years old family friend said, "We're proud of you, kid." I walked in and he flinched like a dog hearing a gun. His eyes darted, like the ledger had become his shadow. He didn't speak to me. I liked that. Silence tells you the shape of fear better than any confession. "You want to come clean?" I asked, leaning against the wooden wall. He looked at me and I saw something: real panic, then calculation. He'd been taught that charisma was more powerful than truth. Now his charm could not buy back the truth. "No," he said. "Why would I? We could get through this. It's a bump. You've always seen life as a road built by other people's excuses." I said. "But roads get holes. You were driving arrogant enough to break an axle." He stood up. He looked like a younger version of our father. Tight jaw, forced smile. "You're playing a dangerous game. I want only one thing." I said. "What?" "Transparency." He laughed like he was swallowing glass. "That's ideal, not tactical. It's reality," I said, "and I will make it stick." He left the bar with 2 of his friends, men who had always been in his orbit, out of loyalty or gain. They walked away with more than a hanger-on's confidence. I watched and felt the satisfaction of a plan working clean, quiet, lethal. Asterisk. Revenge is a landscape of consequences. You set the first domino in motion, and you have to be ready for the collapse. People will run. People will strike back. They will hurt the things you love as they scramble. I had been careful. I assumed they would react with fear, not fury. I underestimated one thing: the fierceness of a man who had never been questioned. After the press, Alex doubled down. He hired reputation fixers and private investigators and quietly contacted a lawyer who threatened the paper. They tried to bury the story with lawsuits and delays, and watched as every deposit memo and hurried email slipped into the public sphere like rain. But this was the easy part. The ledger was the axe at the tree. Public exposure was the first swing. I had scalded heat to apply next: personal exposure. The real reveal, who he had been. The ledger hinted at a pattern. Alex had a taste for the easy silence of people who needed him for access. He'd convinced several women to sign non-disclosure agreements in exchange for favors, loans, or quiet companionships. Those were fragile silences. I hunted them down. I remember the small apartment over a bodega where a woman named Rosa answered the door with mascara tracks and a cigarette that had burned to its filter. She had been paid hush money and then discarded. "He took everything," she said, voice flat. Then he acted like he'd always been concerned. "You want to help me?" I asked. She eyed me. "What do you want in return?" "I want the truth to be enough." I said. "Tell it." She told me about a trip Alex had taken under the pretense of charity logistics. They'd kissed. He'd whispered promises of partnership and investment. 2 weeks later, he'd written checks to another woman in town. The pattern was small betrayals that left large hollows. I collected her testimony and stitched it with other fragments of mail's deliveries. I built a narrative no lawyer could trample. A man who had used the word care, like a currency. We sent a packet to the woman whose image was central to Alex's public persona, Jenna. The packet was not a threat. It was a mirror. It had receipts and flight logs. It had things the PR team had never accounted for. Jenna called me at midnight. "Who are you?" she asked, voice raw. "I'm the sibling you stepped on for a stage," I said, "and I'm done watching you hide under him," she cried. Not from fear, something else. Regret, maybe. She told me she'd been kept in the dark, not by loyalty, but by manipulation. She had learned of quiet payments Alex made so that people stayed quiet. She had believed the story he told, that they were partners in altruism. The truth didn't erase that. It made her see she was too part of a performance. She asked me, through tears, what I wanted. I said very little. I want the truth. Told plainly. She agreed. When Jenna went on the record soft, filmed in her kitchen, candid in row Alex's shelter splintered. She spoke of being misled, of seeing invoices and feeling manipulated. The board members, the political donor, the glue money man began to collapse with quiet statements. The charity's website became a list of withdrawn endorsements. Alex called Dad. "This is a witch hunt," he said. "We can fight it." Dad's voice had a tremble I hadn't heard since Mom's cancer scare years ago. "Alex, we need to think of the family. I'm not losing everything because you couldn't keep a secret," he snapped. I watched him on TV, in a live sit-down where the anchor tried to look sympathetic but couldn't hide the shimmer of a scandal. He didn't shed tears. He had no cause to shed tears. He had only himself. But the truth had momentum. It kept rolling. Then came the threats. Voices in the night, words on the phone, an anonymous letter with no return address. Someone tried to break into my office. Someone else made a point of following Rosa home. The things we expose bruise other people. People who had once been close to Alex started losing jobs because of guilt by association. I had not wanted collateral damage, but the world is not a controlled lab. I had prepared myself to be hated. I had not prepared for the sting of seeing people I liked suffer because my need for fairness was absolute. You think you can exact vengeance without sacrifice. You're wrong. There is always an altar. I placed things on it that night and they burned. A man in a dark suit, private security, he said, found me after a lecture I gave about data governance. He was not interested in philosophy. He wanted to warn me. His message was simple. Stop, or what's left of the people around you will be taken apart. I told him to leave. I didn't care. My anger had a face now, and that face was not malleable. Everything changed the night my father was hospitalized. He collapsed on his way home from a late-night attempt to fix what was broken. The hospital hallway smelled of bleach. Monitors beeped like small, calculating judges. The doctor's face is something you do not forget. Washed out. Soft with news. He's stable, she said. He had a stroke. We have to monitor him. They kept Dad overnight, and I sat by his bed, watching the machines breathe for him. Alex did not visit, not for a long time. He had statements to prepare and lawyers to call. When he finally came, standing in the doorway with a briefcase and a press-ready face, he looked smaller than he ever had. The sight of him there taxing the room with his presence made me realize the cost of everything we'd wrought. Was I satisfied? A corner of my heart recoiled at the price. He muttered something about forgiveness and responsibility. Dad gripped his hand and squeezed with almost terrible strength, like someone clinging to the side of a crumbling bridge. That night, as Dad, breathing shallow and machine steady, slept, Alex leaned in and said to me with a voice that had worn out charm, "We can put this behind us." "You mean, you can apologize, and we pretend it never happened?" I asked. "Yes," he said, publicly. "We say we made mistakes. We donate the leftover funds. We show change." "And what about accountability?" I asked. "What about the people who were harmed?" He looked at Dad and I saw calculation. He wanted a narrative that would let him continue. "You're asking for ruin," he said. I realized then I had become someone willing to take ruin in order to trade a lie for truth. I wanted things revealed, entire. I wanted the ledger to be more than paper. I wanted to use it to restore some balance. We were both standing at the edge of choices. He chose deflection. I chose exposure. I walked away and drafted the final public packet. It would go not to journalists, but to federal investigators on a Monday morning. I assembled everything, double-checked metadata, refreshed times. The rest was mechanical detail and patience. On Sunday night, I went to the bar where our family friend worked. I sat in a corner and watched Alex drink himself small. His laughter was hollow, the way people make noise in a room to disguise the ache inside. He saw me, and his face folded for a moment, an expression that might have been pity for the boy he'd thought little of for years, or the recognition of a threat realized. "You'll ruin us," he said. "You ruined yourself long ago," I replied. A week later, federal agents came at dawn with a polite knock. The PR team had not prepared for the sound of actual legal processes. Cameras flashed. Alex's life would be dissected. He was efficient in court. He smiled for the photographers and said he welcomed accountability, as long as that accountability was measured and fair. He staged his sorrow in sound bites. People who had once clapped at his name now looked at him like someone they might have been wrong to trust. I watched from the sidelines as the scaffolding of the life they had built around him was dismantled by depositions and subpoenas. His friends turned witness when immunity was offered. Jenna left him quietly, taking what dignity she could. but exposure alone is not revenge. Revenge tastes different when it has to cut deeper. It must be personal. I wanted him to feel what I had felt. The slow chew of being erased. Not by me directly, but by the world he expected to protect him. I found a way. A private investigator found a secret. Alex had been lying about one thing on his resume that, combined with the ledger, made him legally vulnerable to charges of obstruction. He'd taken a course overseas and claimed certification he hadn't earned. In a court of public trust, that detail could be the domino that topples him into criminal liability. I leaked it strategically. To one reporter who loved the smell of scandal, and to a legal blogger who loved the sound of plummeting reputations. I watched as podcasts dissected his motives and pundits debated the moral texture of his life. I felt something cold and precise under my ribs. Satisfaction. Maybe. Relief. Definitely. The world I'd endured for decades was being rewritten. Alex's fall was painful and humiliating. He lost his position, lost endorsement deals, and finally, lost the family's soft insistence that he was blameless. Dadhood always loved his image of his son more than his son sat at our childhood kitchen table and drank coffee as if it might heal the hole in him. You did what you had to do, he said to me one evening. Voice, small, embarrassed. You think I wanted this for you? I asked for any of us. This wasn't theater for me. This was truth. He looked away. He could not reconcile the son he'd raised with the man in the papers. I kept my head down for a while. I had expected release when the last document went public. What I found instead was emptiness mixed with a strange, fierce clarity. Life without the weight of other people's assumptions is both terrifying and liberating. A year after everything fell apart, our family photograph, once front and center in the living room, was packed away. The house sold. Dad moved into a small condo that would remind him less of what he'd lost. Alex rehabilitation, a humbling, quiet existence. Jenna left town and started something new, which I wished for her without irony. I visited Dad once. We shared a meal awkwardly. He asked for forgiveness in a way that did not demand absolution. I thought I was protecting all of us, he said. You protected the image. I replied, not the people. He took that and did not argue. Revenge had given me something I had not expected, not satisfaction alone, but a brutal clean slate. I had forced truth into sunlight, even though the heat burned more than one person. I had become someone people would now call dangerous if they were uncharitable. They would be right. I have no illusions that my methods were pure. The ledger was ugly. My motives were not saintly. I wanted to hurt him the way I had been hurt. I wanted to claw back years of being unseen. And in the quiet after the fire, I sat with the knowledge that my life would never be the same. I had taken a blade to a lie, and the wound had required tending. I had to live with what I had done. But the world I stepped into afterward was one where no one could casually dismiss me. I had become someone whose silence was not weakness, it was a choice. If you liked my story, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with as many people as possible. Thanks for watching.